Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. This is your host, Ryan Coyle, joined by Joe Kometz for our weekly college football show. Week 11, Joe, already. Can't believe it. 3 regular season games left for most of these teams. It's pretty crazy that we're already here. It feels like just yesterday we were breaking down Western Kentucky, Hawaii, Vanderbilt, Austin P, Wyoming, all in our Week 0 show. But Week 11 now, we're going to start off this week, as always, by recapping last week, and then we're going to be going over the top 25 rankings. As we're recording this show on Tuesday night, about 30 minutes after the rankings came out. We'll run through those, dissect them a little bit, and then get into our weekly show preview. But welcome back, Joan. How are we?
Fantastic. I'm jacked up. We got our first. I know last week were the first college football playoff rankings, but these were kind of like the first real rankings. Like, all right, here's where these teams stand. We had a lot of movement already just after 1 week, which is I love to see that. I love to see chaos, and it kind of seems like after number one, we had pure chaos throughout the country last week. A lot of uncertainty in the rankings, and let's dive into it.
All right, just to recap last week real quick, like you said, chaos was ensued. You had your worst week of the season, but I'm sure you don't mind it with Notre Dame finding a way to win, as well as LSU kind of knocking off Bama. You went 6-11, lost your best bet and upset last week, but we know you'll bounce back this week. I had a pretty average week. I feel like I've been right around this mark for most of the season. I went 9-8. Finally hit my best bet though. Went to double overtime, but I didn't even need the double overtime. It would have hit in regulation. And then I lost my upset with Kansas State over Texas. Texas was up big. Kansas State kind of came back. So that was still a pretty good game. But 9-8 for me, 6-11 for you. And like I said, we'll run through the top 25 and kind of break that down a little bit. So we'll go from 25 to 1. We got Washington at 25. Nothing in them getting much respect, sitting at as a 2-loss, 7-2 team. 24 Kentucky, 23 FSU, 22 UCF, who's part of the show this week, 21 Illinois, number 20 Notre Dame after beating Clemson, 19 Kansas State, 18 Texas, 17 Tulane, 16 NC State, 15 UNC, 14 PSU, 13 Utah, 12 UCLA, 11 Ole Miss, 10 Clemson, 9 Alabama, 8 USC, 7 LSU, 6 Oregon, 5 Tennessee, 4 TCU, 3 Michigan, 2 Ohio State, and number 1 Georgia. Just going through that top 25, what's kind of one thing that really sticks out to you, Joe?
One thing that really stuck out to me here was where the top 2 teams in the ACC kind of landed. You have Clemson, who came off demoralizing, just ass kicking by my Irish, and then who are coming in at, like you said, number 20. Shout out Notre Dame. And then you have UNC at 15. These are most likely going to be the teams that represent their respective divisions in the ACC title game. UNC was a weird team. I don't know about them. I think them coming in at 15 kind of solidified that any potential Cinderella run at a playoff spot is probably not going to happen. And Clemson, the committee does keep them and Bama alive at 10. Potentially, we're going to start talking about 2-loss Bama. But the big thing that stuck out to me, and I don't want to take too many talking points from you, Coyle, LSU at number 7 actually has a chance to be the first 2-loss team to make the playoffs. If they would need to win out, of course, but one of those wins would include a win over Georgia. They have wins over number 11 Ole Miss, number 9 Alabama. They have that loss to Tennessee at number 5. But Tennessee probably is going to the conference title game because they would need Georgia to lose 2 more SEC games. I think they only have 2 left because they play Georgia Tech at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, LSU with a chance, really, really alive in a really good spot.
Yeah, one of the things, coincidentally, I kind of wanted to hit on was UNC. Them sitting there at 15 with their only loss to a Notre Dame team that's on the rise, who by season's end could be in the top 10 if all things go accordingly. I think throughout the past few years, we've been kind of breaking this down. Like we have like a cutoff line for a team that could make it. I think it is at UNC. If chaos ensues, they do find if Clemson wins out and they find a way to match up with them in the ACC title game and beat them, maybe if chaos ensues. But I don't see Penn State getting in. Utah, doubt it. UCLA, though, from 12 up, I think you can make a chance besides Alabama probably because they won't be playing in the SEC title game. I think from 12 up, still have a chance to crack that top four. The committee show was kind of really bringing down that they still believe Tennessee has a chance. They'll need a few lucky things to go their way, I think. But I think the one other main point of emphasis this late in the season in the Pac-12 has Oregon, USC, Utah, and UCLA, four teams in the top 13 after kind of being a bit of a dumpster fire over the past few years in terms of good quality opponents. I think that's a pretty good thing for them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Pac-12 has kind of been an afterthought past couple of years. I think they've only made it to the playoff 2 times in its existence, which is maybe 3. Could be wrong. I know Oregon's made it, because they made it to the national game, and then Washington made it. But I think that's honestly it. We've had years where Oregon has, kind of gotten themselves eliminated at the very end. But like you said, there's 4 teams in the top 13 where you could probably make that cutoff line at UCLA at 12 with an exemption for UNC, depending on what happened. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of meat on the bone left. In Oregon this week, a game we'll get to eventually. Oregon gets Washington this week, a top 25 opponent to help continue to boost up their resume. Mm-hmm. And the one big thing for Oregon is Ohio State and Michigan need to play each other. They will play each other at the end of the season, and one of them will not be able to play in the Big Ten title game. So if it comes down to, let's say, Georgia, which we all expect to win out, TCU, let's just say they went out. Ohio State, Michigan, winner. There's 3 of your 4. Then the 4th comes down to a Pac-12 champion Oregon with 1 loss, or USC, could still be USC. Tennessee, who didn't even win their division with 1 loss, granted they have good wins. Or a 1-loss Michigan or Ohio State team that, recency bias, I feel like would keep them out, especially if it's Michigan, whose schedule kind of sucks outside of Ohio State. Pac-12 has a real shot right now. Once again, they're in a very good spot as well.
I think, though, if LSU wins out, I think they'll get in because that means they'll have to beat either Georgia or Tennessee in the title game, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think at that point, a LSU team that's on fire with a game that they probably should have won against Florida State in week 1, which I think LSU is Florida State's biggest fan for the rest of the season. They want them to be as good as possible, and then finding a way to beat Alabama and then losing a pretty bad game to Tennessee. But I think if LSU wins out, I think they're going to find a way in just because going through kind of the SEC gauntlet with only 1 loss there, I think that would be it would be hard to keep them out. Especially because I'm expecting some of these teams to slip up. And like you said, some of the strength of schedule stuff, like a 1-loss Michigan team with that non-conference that we talked about at the beginning of the season. What was it? Colorado State, Hawaii, and some other layup team.
How could you forget Coyle?
Oh, it was UConn. Yeah.
Huskies.
Yeah. So, I mean, not exactly murderers row there, but any other comments on the top 25 before we head into our show?
Shout out Tulane and UCF. Fantastic for them. That's really all I got. We kind of broke down everything we needed to.
All right. Well, special show this week. We usually do our top 5 games. This week we have 6 games, and one of those is a special game. It is the 63rd ever Cortland Jug game at Yankee Stadium. It's a Division III matchup. It's the biggest Division III college football game. You and I, Joseph, as well as Lucas, will be in attendance for this one for Jake Ville's Bombers. And it's a great game. Number 11, Cortland, 9-0 versus number 12, Ithaca, 9-0. 2 Division III schools. You might not have heard of them before, but it should be an awesome game. 12 o'clock on the Yes Network, the channel the Yankees play on at Yankee Stadium. This game was played 2019, I believe it was, at MetLife Stadium, and they sold it out. So, and we're expecting another sellout crowd. If you go and try and buy tickets on the secondary market right now, you're paying like $75 to get into this game. I paid $50 for nosebleed seats. So, excited to be there. It's going to be a pretty fun, cool experience, but figured we'd give them a shout out this week and break down the game. So what are your thoughts on the Cortland Jug game, Joe?
I'm jacked up for this game. I mean, when you first told me about, having the opportunity to go, this was back in the summer. You were like, hey, Ithaca and Cortland are playing at Yankee Stadium. I'm like, I'm in. Let's do it. It feels like that was so long ago now. Here we are. It's all of a sudden, the week of the game. But this is, for the people that don't know about D3, us going to a D3 school kind of, I have a lot of friends from high school that went and played D3, kind of learning a little bit about the D3 system. There's a 32 team tournament. There's 27 conferences, and how the NCAA does it is all of their conferences get an auto bid for the conference champ. There's only 5 at-large spots for the entirety of the tournament. That could mean the 11-12 game right here, which is what it is in terms of the rankings, the loser will probably miss the playoffs just because of how the NCAA has their system, which is insanity to me. But this is quite literally a playoff game for both of these teams. They hate each other. It's a massive rivalry in D3 football in the Northeast. Like you said, it's the biggest game in D3 by far. They sold out MetLife. It was this game is the largest attendance ever for a D3 football game. They're going to probably have about 50,000 people at Yankee Stadium for this game. Coyle just told me right before the show that the bars are opening at 5 a.m. for this game. It's going to be a madhouse. I can't wait. And I got the Bombers winning on a game-winning 2-point conversion. I feel like this is going to be a slugfest type of game. I got it 22-21. Shout out Jakeville. Shout out the Bombers. Shout out Ithaca. The boys are going to be going nuts. Give me the Blue Bombers 22-21.
All right. I also believe that because of the way Division III works, most of the schools are East Coast. Then there's a few in like Texas, like Illinois, Wisconsin, and there's like nothing like out west. Like it's like pretty much Texas is as far as it goes. So most of the highly ranked teams are looking at the top 25 poll are like Wisconsin, Illinois, like Texas. So, and I'm pretty sure they kind of break it up by region. So I think whoever wins this game will be like the number 1 seed in like the east part of the bracket or something. So they're also playing for, I think, Joe, one of these teams will find their way in as at large, like as one of like the last teams. But I think the winner of this game will host going throughout for the East. Like they'll get to host the rest of the games until I believe it's either the Final Four or the national title at their own stadium. So huge game. Like I guess you could probably say in the history of the rivalry, it's got to be up there for one of the top games. Talking about kind of like we know this, like it's Alabama Auburn, but it's cool to kind of break this game down. I'm going to go Ithaca with the win 27-24. Kind of breaking down the stats, getting a chance to go up and see one of Ithaca's games this year. It's a game that features a high-level defense with Ithaca only allowing a little over 9 points per game, and a Cortland offense that's very high-level, scoring about 50 per game. So I think it's going to come down to which unit comes to play more, Ithaca's defense or Cortland's offense. The Bombers have won 3 out of the last 5 in this series, but lost last year's game by 1 after a blocked field goal in the final minutes. This is an experienced Ithaca team, though, that has been building up to this moment and a potential deep run in the Division III playoffs. Ithaca also won that matchup that we referred to earlier at MetLife Stadium. And I think that kind of builds over to this, kind of shows that, they're not afraid of the big stage, the big moment, playing in front of all those people. I think that kind of goes without saying when you're playing a game for, who knows, maybe 5,000 people. This is games usually played in front of at one of the schools to 45, 50,000 people. I mean, that's a big difference. This is the biggest game these kids will ever play in, most likely. I think the Bombers get their revenge from last year's loss in this one. They have an all-American kicker. I think he hits a game winner here as time expires. So I got the game-winning kick. You got the game-winning 2-point conversion. All right. Now we go back to our Division I slate. Probably won't get much better than the Ithaca Cortland game, though. But we got number 9 Alabama at number 11 Ole Miss, 3:30 on CBS. Bama, 11.5-point favorites, over under 63.5. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
I mean, this has all of a sudden became the most intriguing matchup of the season. You have an Alabama team with 2 conference losses. I mean, Quill, you and I were talking on Saturday at the bar. This is the earliest I can remember a Nick Saban Alabama team with 2 losses in my college football life. Like, I really pretty much started paying attention in like the 2010 season, like the turn of the decade. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they've had this many. It could have been at the very beginning of the decade, but still, This is
Yeah,
the
so I looked it up because I remember talking to you about that last week. So back in 2007, the first year of Saban, they went 7-6, but like 5 wins of those were vacated um, along the way somewhere. And then back in 2019, they lost 2 games, but it wasn't until the end. They have a few seasons in there where they lost 2 games, but one of them was in a bowl game. So they had one loss for the majority of the season. So you would have to date all the way back to 2007 for uh, an Alabama team to have 2 losses this early.
stunning. There are kids in high school that were born after that had happened. Like just
Mhm.
crazy stats. That being said, though, I mean, it's kind of like what we said a couple weeks ago. Bama's going to be playing. You thought that practice after Tennessee was tough. Nick Saban probably has murdered 6, sticks athletes. He's probably growing 4 more Devontae Smiths in his lab underneath Brian Denny, getting ready for next season. I got Alabama winning this game 45-31. Not a lot of analysis. I just think kind of like the pissed off factor. Ole Miss, the one real great team they had to play this year in LSU, they did not look that good against. I know the score was kind of close, but LSU kind of dominated for the most of the game. Um, Ole Miss is, Alabama's a different animal. I know they get them at home. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Ole Miss keeps it close. Hope Ole Miss wins. I just can't see it.
I agree. I like Bama to win this one here as well. I'm going to take it closer than you, though. I'm going to take 38-33 Alabama. So Ole Miss plus 11.5, over 63.5 hits there. And just kind of piggybacking off what we were just saying about Alabama, it's pretty crazy how, like we said, 2 losses. I mean, it's just been complete and utter dominance under Nick Saban. It's going to be really weird to see like when they have the graphic up on the screen with the 2 next to their name and not ranked number 2, but 2 losses. But just like we were saying after that Mississippi State game for Alabama, I feel bad for Ole Miss this week because it seems like practice in Tuscaloosa is just going to be pretty chaotic and a lot of extra running, a lot of not so nice language, a lot of curse words, I think, flowing out of the Alabama staff's mouth. Um, but I think that Vegas isn't showing much respect here for this Ole Miss team. That could mean like I'm playing myself into a trap with this one. But 11.5 point favorites here, Alabama, to they have 2 losses. Ole Miss only has one. And if they win this game, they could very easily win out and be sitting at 11-1, most likely on the outside looking in for the SEC title game in the playoff. But they're another team that's not dead yet. Neither of these defenses are exactly the 85 Chicago Bears. So I love points this week. I think we kind of get a nice up and down shootout type game. But I just don't see Alabama dropping 2 straight games. I wonder when the last time that happened was. A lot of teams, knowing their kind of playoff hopes are dead, they would just fold it over, pack it in. But that just isn't the standard at Alabama. I think they find a way to win again here in a shootout, but the Rebels find a way to cover. So Ole Miss 11 plus 11.5 and over 63.5. Our third game of the week, we go to a group of 5 game. The last time these two schools will meet up, I assume, unless there's a path for them in the AAC title game. Not sure about that. You would probably know better there, Joe. But we got number 22 UCF at number 17 Tulane, 3:30 on ESPN2. Tulane minus 1.5 over under 51.5.
Shout out to Green Wave. Best start since 1998, the year they went undefeated. That was back in the first year of the BCS where they didn't have any systems 5. It was after Utah made it in 04 where the BCS, they kind of expanded it a bit to where I think it was like if you were a top 16 team from the group of 5, you would get an auto bid to near 6 game. They didn't. They got no respect from the polls either, which, I mean, let's be honest here, it's Tulane playing in the Conference USA back in that day and even now. But best starts is 98. The only other undefeated team in 98 was Tennessee. So shout out Tulane. That being said, what you were saying before, if UCF was to win this game, it would be them, Tulane, and Cincinnati all tied at 4-1, and then Tulane would play Cincinnati in the last game of the season, which is going to be
Wow.
another huge game, depending on what happens here. So these teams could meet again. If it would have to be UCF winning for the most likely scenario of that to happen. But like I was saying, shout out to Green Wave. They're at home. Game day should have been here. It's an ESPN game. I know, Herb Strait and all those guys are going to be calling the TCU Texas game, which we'll get to later. But, like I've been saying all year, when you're game day and you go to a more fun atmosphere, it's electric. App State was insane. Tulane, the fans are starved. Tulane has a pretty decent alumni base. They're a pretty good school. Their alumni are pretty rich people. Their fans are probably going nuts. It's going to probably be the biggest Tulane home game ever, potentially. I'm expecting
After
this.
the hurricane ruined the Oklahoma game last year.
Yeah, that is true. People do forget that was supposed to happen. And then Tulane almost beat him in Oklahoma, which would have been insane. But Tulane has a running back. I pulled up his name because I was blanking on it. You got Tyjae Spears, great running back. He's got 745 yards rushing on the ground, 10 TDs, averaging 5.6 yards a carry. That's going to kind of be UCF. If UCF stops him, they should be able to win the game. But Gus Malzahn's a big-time coach. He's coaching a lot of big-time games before at Auburn. So I don't really think going into Yulman Stadium in New Orleans is really going to, have him shaking in his boots. UCF's going to be ready. I think this, on paper, is going to end up being the best game of the weekend.
Game day should have been at Yankee Stadium. Actually, that would have been something.
Yes.
I know Ithaca's like a big broadcast journalism school. I'm surprised that has never happened before. I feel like that's one of those cool things that they would have done with probably have a bunch of ESPN alums there. But that's kind of besides the point. I like Tulane in this one as well. I'm going to take them higher scoring game, 31-28. So Tulane -1.5, and we got the over hit in there, 51.5. Quick shout out to the Tulane logo. I think one of the more underrated logos in the country. Love that. This is a matchup, though, looking at the numbers and kind of peeking in, watching these teams a little bit this year. Two super equal squads. And I think this is going to be more of a, it sounds stupid, but more of a game where a team loses it rather than a team goes out there, dominates, and wins it. It's going to be the team, I think, that has some of those self-inflicted wounds and just hands it over. I think whoever takes better care of the football in this one is going to find a way to win here. When you look at UCF, John Reese Plumlee is a freak, a quarterback, a freak athlete, and he has the potential to just be kind of like one of those games where he's just like, fuck it, I'm taking over this one. Kind of like Justin Fields was doing with his legs last week en route to the most rushing yards by an NFL quarterback in one game ever. He has the potential to do that and just take a football game over. But I think going back to what I said about the turnovers, Tulane only has 9 turnovers on the year opposed to UCF's 14. I think in a game between two equally matched squads, it's going to come down to turnovers. So I think the difference in this one is Tulane taking care of the football one more time than UCF. UCF turning it over in a clutch situation, and that leads to a Tulane victory. And they cover that 1.5 and over 51.5 hits. Fifth game of the week, number 25, Washington. I was talking about that earlier. I think they're being a little disrespected. I think that they deserve to be higher ranked than Kentucky, Florida State, maybe up there around 22, 23. But they come in at 25. They play at number 6, Oregon, 7 o'clock on Fox. Oregon -12.5, over under 69.5.
I was wrong about being wrong about Bo Nix. I am all back into what I said my sophomore year when I thought Bo Nix was going to be the greatest quarterback of all time. He might win the Heisman this year, which is, and I don't think that's an exaggeration to say. If you look at what happened, this past week, Hendon Hooker didn't look great. You had Bryce Young, lost. Blake Corum for Michigan, running back, not good. CJ Stroud, I know it was raining, but abysmal stats. Bo Nix, after that, has been one of the best teams in the country, by far. If they don't have that game against Georgia on their schedule, even if you fill that in with an FCS school that doesn't impress, Oregon's probably sitting at number 3 right now in the polls. I know they're 6th because of that loss. Obviously, it's easy for me to replace games that didn't exist. But I'm picking Bo Nix, and this, of course, will be the game he looks terrible and Washington pulls off the upset. And I look like an idiot for finally buying back in on Bo Nix. But I think Oregon's going to cover the spread fairly easily. I think the under is going to hit, though, because I just don't think Michael Penix can keep up with this Oregon offense. I think Oregon is going to just smoke the Huskies from the start. Them being at home here is huge. And this is a big opportunity for Oregon, too. They're the prime. It's them and then TCU, which I know I've said that game about 4 times. We're going to get to that game in a little bit, as the 2 big night games on Saturday. And Oregon has a chance to really put their nuts on the table and be like, listen, we deserve a rematch against Georgia. I don't think they'd win it, but I think it would be a lot more interesting of a game than it was week 1.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Joe. I like Oregon to win outright, but I'm going to take Washington to cover. Close, though. Oregon 41, Washington 30, Washington plus 12.5 over 69.5 hits. I've said it a few times throughout the season, but shout out to Oregon, Bo Nix, and Dan Lanning. After that beat down against Georgia week 1, they've had a super, super impressive season since. I thought, getting the defensive coordinator from that Georgia team would make this a defensive-minded program, but Bo Nix has led this offense to 43 points per game and 520 yards per game on offense this year. The Pac-12 is actually really fun. When I was looking through, making my notes down for this game, I was thinking I would love a little basketball conference tournament style type thing with the top 6 teams in this country: Oregon, Washington, UCLA, USC, Utah, and Oregon State. You can keep the bottom half of the Pac-12 out of it, but I think that would be super fun. Give the top 2 teams a bye. I think it would just be really competitive, really high score, and this is a super even, fun, competitive league this year. But besides that, Washington had a victory over a ranked Oregon State team Friday night as well, and Michael Penix, you say you don't have faith in him. He continues to lead the nation in passing yards. Oregon's defense isn't that stellar, though, allowing 385 yards per game, so Washington should be able to still move the ball in the Ducks, but I think Oregon is just at another level right now, and especially being at home, they find a way to win. But I think Washington gets the cover, maybe even a backdoor cover there. Quick note, though, on Oregon, they've scored 40 or more in every single game this year except the Georgia one. So that kind of just goes to show you how well this offense is played. But like I said, Oregon 41, Washington 30, Washington plus 12.5 and over 69.5. Fifth game of the week, number 19, Kansas State at Baylor, who comes in unranked. I was expecting to see them maybe down at 24, 25 when the rankings came out. But this is 7 o'clock on FS1. Baylor -3, over under 53.5.
Yeah, Coyle, I'm with you. I was expecting Baylor to be around the 24, 25 spot. But I looked in the AP poll and the coaches poll. They're both receiving votes in those polls. So still not in the top 25, but, they're in that conversation where if they win this game, I think they'd definitely be in the college football playoff top 25 next week. Real quick, Coyle, what you were saying about conference tournaments potentially for football, I think we're heading that direction with expansion. So that's going to be fantastic one day. That's all I'm going to say about that. Back to this game. I have Baylor winning 38-30 over Kansas State. Baylor -3 will hit. I'm taking the over of 53.5. Big 12 overs are back. I'm all in on the Big 12 overs again. But Baylor's currently in a 3-way tie for second place with Texas and Kansas State. TCU obviously at number 1. But the fun fact about Baylor, their last 3 games are against Kansas State, Texas, and TCU, the top teams in the Big 12. So we're going to really quickly learn if Baylor's 4-2 because they played nobody, or they're a legit team. They're 6-3. They had that weird loss week 2 at BYU. I remember watching that game on my phone. It was 2 a.m. because it was a 10:15 kickoff.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very fun game, but looking back, weird loss. Oklahoma State looks terrible now. That's another bad loss for them. But I think and at West Virginia too, another terrible loss. I was looking for that game on my phone. But I just like Dave Aranda better than Chris Kleiman as a head coach. I think Baylor at home is going to be a huge difference. Kansas State, I think, is good. I know I picked them as my preseason sleeper, and I could still be right about Kansas State if they win this game because Kansas State has a very simple path. They've already had to play TCU and Texas. They're only 2 conference losses. If they win out, they're going to be in a good spot to potentially get into the Big 12 title game because there's no divisions in the Big 12. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think Baylor's going to have a couple of big plays. Dave Aranda is going to have these guys up. There's a reason why Baylor was so good last year. I think they finished 6th because they had 2 losses. The COVID year, I'm pretty sure they were knocking on the door. That might have been the year before the COVID year. And that might have been Matt Rule's last year I'm thinking of in my head. But Baylor has been a very good program that no one talks about lately. They've been very consistent with what they do, getting to Big 12 conference title games. They won it last year. I think they're going to find their way back this year with Dave Aranda. He's going to get the guys up, lead them in. I don't like the quarterback this year for Baylor. I like Bohannon a lot last year. But, he's played well enough to get him in a position to be in position. I think Baylor's, a couple of weird things are going to happen. But then I think it's going to all fall apart next week against TCU. So give me Baylor here, 38-30 over Kansas State.
I'm taking the Wildcats in this one. I got them 35-31. So Kansas State +3 over 53.5. A little bit more on the Big 12 standings right now. You got TCU at 6-0 at the top, and then a bunch of teams kind of in the middle of the pack there at that 4-2, 3-3 mark, with Kansas State and Baylor both at 4-2 in the conference. Winner of this game, especially if Texas loses to TCU, gives them a real edge over these last few weeks when it comes to earning a right into that Big 12 title game. Baylor, kind of going back to their schedule, Joe, hasn't beaten anyone this season. Their best victory is over Kansas or Oklahoma, you could argue, who neither of them is ranked right now. And then they dropped a game to a BYU team that, if you remember, we were saying maybe had a chance at the playoff, just based off the schedule they had. They've kind of shit the bed this year. West Virginia, who's only 1-5 in the Big 12, and then Oklahoma State, but that's back when they were fully healthy. I just think this Baylor team is fraudulent, is kind of as fake as it gets. I don't think Kansas State is that fantastic either, but I think they're more legit than Baylor, and they've lost to Tulane, who we touched on already, who top 25 team with a chance to potentially vault up into the top 15 after this week. TCU, who's undefeated, and then lost last week to Texas in a game that if they didn't start out so slow and have a bunch of dumb penalties and self-inflicted wounds at the beginning, they would have had a pretty good chance to win. So this is a Kansas State team that I think has played against better competition. When they've played against better competition, they've kind of rose to the moment and played better. I like Deuce Vaughn to have a pretty big game on the ground here. For a defensive-minded coach like Dave Aranda, they haven't been able to really stop anyone this season. So I like Kansas State to win this one on the road. I'm going to take them 35-31. And then our sixth game of the week, we have number 4 TCU at number 18 Texas. 7:30 ABC College Game Day. It'll be in the house here. Texas -7. For the life of me, I don't understand how they came up with this number. And then over under 66. I see you got Texas winning, Joe. Kind of break down why for me.
Yeah, I have Texas win this game 45-35 just because of simple fact. TCU, I don't know. I want to believe in TCU so badly. I want to go all in on the Horned Frogs. But their games they've played this season, going back to Oklahoma State, I believe Spencer Sanders got hurt. I don't know if he got knocked out, but I think he got shooken up in that game. They knock out Kansas State starting quarterback. JT Daniels stays okay for West Virginia. Last week against Texas Tech, they knock out their starting quarterback. That's 6 of the last 7 games where a starting quarterback has either got knocked out of the game or gotten hurt in that game. Now, obviously, you can't fault TCU. They're obviously not doing it on purpose. You can't take anything away from their season because they're 9-0 with the ABC primetime, the biggest game of the week. The game day is going to Texas. I just think this is brewing up to be the perfect storm for Texas to pull off this win. Maybe not cover the 7. I might be getting a little bit ambitious there. That's kind of a Vegas knows something thing for me because I'm just a stupid idiot when it comes to gambling. But that being said, TCU going on the road, Texas, still has the attitude of, we're big brother in the state. We're Texas. We can do whatever we want. Quinn Ewers, I think, is going to have a massive game. This is a chance for Texas to build momentum for going forward because they still have to go to the SEC in a couple of years, where they're going to get smacked around, in my opinion, for a while. Same with Oklahoma. But this is one of those wins that you can tell yourself as a program, hey, we're taking a step in the right direction. We just beat a team that was projected to go to the playoff. We have a chance hosting them. That crowd is going to be jacked up. They're going to be drinking all day. Primetime game out in Austin. I just think that's the perfect storm for the glass slipper to finally fall off TCU's foot. I hope I'm wrong. Like I say, I don't care if I go 0-30 with my picks. I like seeing chaos. I like seeing Cinderella stories. I just can't pick the Horned Frogs this week.
Yeah, I've kind of harped on it throughout the season that I don't think TCU is necessarily fraudulent, but I think they've, like you spelled out, have had a lot of good things go their way, but they're kind of like Providence from college basketball last year, where it feels like they caught a bunch of breaks, but at the end of the day, you can only play who's in front of you. But I just think the media loves and Vegas loves Texas just a little bit too much. I'm going to still ride with TCU to win this one, 31-27, TCU +7, and I'm going to take the under of 66. I feel like the over in this game is going to be like one of the biggest plays of the week that Vegas absolutely needs the under on, so I'm going to ride with that. I think if TCU would play Georgia, Tennessee, Michigan, Ohio State, even Toulouse, Alabama, I think they would kind of get pushed around. But to be a 7-point favorite in this one, I'm just not seeing it. This game, though, has some real electric playmakers on offense. When you look at quarterback with you got Quinn Ewers and Max Dugan. At running back, you got Miller and Bijan Robinson. And then at receiver, you got Xavier Worthy and Quentin Johnson. That's probably two of the best groups of big three offensive playmakers in the country. With that being said, though, this kind of seems like a trap over under. Like I said, with being only 66, both these teams combined to average 79 points per game. I think Vegas is just begging people to take the over, so I think it could be a little bit closer and more defensive in this one. And if the over hits, it might be something that's due to one or two overtimes. I've been fading against TCU most weeks, picking against them, so I apologize to TCU fans if I'm your unlucky jinx, but I think it's time for me to give them their respect, and I'm going to take them to get the outright win here, 31-27. So TCU plus a 7 and under 66. All right. With our game previews out of the way, we go on to the best bets now. I'm looking to go 2 in a row here for the first time all season. We're going to stick with the hot hand with the LSU Tigers. I'm taking LSU -3 at Arkansas. I know this could be an emotional letdown type game, but LSU knows they have no room for error, and the committee gave them some respect, bumping them up to number 7, so giving them kind of a path to the title game. I know this game's on the road, but Arkansas also just lost at home to Liberty. LSU is humming right now, and besides the Tennessee game, I think that they've been playing like a top 5 team in the country since that week 1 kind of self-inflicted wound debacle that they had against Florida State. I think you can argue that they might be the first 2-loss playoff team. We certainly talked about that at the beginning of the show. They know that they have to play for that. I think that they go down to Arkansas, win this game, cover that 3 points, and win pretty comfortably by double digits. So LSU -3 is my best bet.
Coyle, I think that's a very good pick. Personally, I was looking at that before we got into this best bet segment. I'm just looking here. Liberty still is not in the top 25, which is surprising to me. Like Liberty, like in the AP poll, I know obviously the AP poll and the coaches poll don't mean anything, but I mean you have Liberty in the AP poll sitting at 19 right now. They're 19th in the coaches poll as well. You'd expect them to at least be 25th. This kind of seemed like a thing where they threw Kentucky in there at 24, which is why do I bring up Kentucky? Is because I'm taking the over in the Tennessee-Missouri game. Let me tell you this, Missouri's defense, not Georgia. But I do think Missouri is a lot better team than their record says they is. Missouri is 4-5, but their losses, since SEC play started, the game they fumbled the ball out of the end zone against Auburn. The game they won, in my opinion, against Auburn. So that counts as a loss. 4-point loss to the number 1 team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs. 7-point loss to Florida. Then they beat Vandy, beat South Carolina, who was number 25 at the time. Then only a 4-point loss at home to Kentucky, who's now 24th in the college football playoff poll. Missouri's not that bad of a football team. And I think Tennessee is probably going to put up at least 46, 47 points. I just need Missouri to get me 10. I think they can do that. So I'm going to take the over there. And I'm just going to lead us into the upset special here because I didn't like anyone this week, to be honest. I didn't want to copy you because I saw you had your pick in before me. I'm going Army plus 275 at Troy. They're 9.5-point dogs. When I'm in doubt, I don't know if you've noticed, I kind of just go with the service academies because no one likes playing the triple option. Army's in danger of being in a look-ahead spot, too, with my Huskies coming to town next week. So, I don't know how this game's going to go. Army now actually all jokes aside, if they want to make a bowl game, I believe they need to win out. I think they're sitting at 3-6. This isn't, your typical Army Black Knights football team, but they, I believe, need to win out against Troy, the Huskies, and Navy in the Army-Navy game just to be sitting in a spot. I'm trying to pull up their record right now as I'm talking, just to be in a spot. Yeah, they're 3-5. So they have 4 games left, actually. I lied. But they need to win 3 out of the last 4 just to be bowl eligible. 2 of those games are against UConn and UMass, so, don't be surprised there. But, I mean, Troy is good. They're 7-2, but we've seen Army go into Power 5 stadiums against Oklahoma, against Michigan, and Michigan needs a game-winning field goal a couple years ago. Kyler Murray in Oklahoma needed overtime to beat Army. The Black Knights can get it done on the road. They have fans around the globe, especially like if you're in that Troy, Alabama area and you were in the Army, you're like, hey, let's go watch Army. Army travels well. I know it sounds stupid, but they have a lot of fans at these games because everyone respects the troops. Give me Army on the road, plus 275.
Yeah, I like the reasoning behind that. You catch them on the wrong day, they're definitely a viable upset team. I'm gonna go with Jake Nardone's North Texas Mean Green here over UAB. They come in as plus 180. They're 6 point dogs on this one. It's one of those like it was a weird number to me looking at it. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and act like I've watched a ton of North Texas football this year, but kind of just looking at numbers, it seems like I might be missing something. North Texas 6-4 overall, 5-1 in the conference, and UAB coming into the year was viewed as the CUSA favorite, I believe, and they're only 4-5 and 2-4 in the conference. The one big flaw for North Texas, which kind of is scaring me a bit about this game, they give up nearly 176 yards per game on the ground, and they're facing a UAB rushing attack that runs for 243 yards per game. One of the better rushing attacks in the country. Their starting back has over 1,200 yards on the ground this year. That's worrying me a little bit, but UAB currently riding a 3-game losing streak, and North Texas has won 4 of their last 5, with that only loss, I believe, coming to UTSA, who's the best team in that conference. Two teams going in opposite directions. I think you can get good value on North Texas at plus 180 here, who's trying to keep atop of the standings with UTSA and make it to the CUSA title game. So I like the Mean Green in this one, plus 180. They're definitely plus the 6, though. Any anything on that game, Joseph?
No, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head. UAB has been a CUSA, they've been a perennial power the past couple of years. They're having a down year. But I agree. This is, one I saw. Like I said, I was thinking about, riding with you. But for the sake of the show, I think I needed to pick a different bet. I think I might look into taking North Texas here money line. I'm definitely going to probably ride with you on LSU -3. And, depending on how the day goes, I might, or how the week goes, in all honesty, I might sprinkle North Texas money line over UAB. Kind of, I really like the pick. I think we're starting to turn some things around here. I know my best bet. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't expecting Oklahoma State to just look like a team that belongs in the Conference USA against Kansas. I wasn't expecting Sanders to be out when I had Oklahoma State -2.5. Maybe one of the worst picks I've ever made. But I think this might be the week we go 4-0 in our like little prop best bet upset section.
All right. Well, you heard it there first. Bit of a long episode. Usually we're around 30 minutes, but we had to break down our bombers as well as the top 25 talk. We will be live at Yankee Stadium. We'll be sure to be posting on Beef Up Front, provide the updates needed, and we will talk next week.